You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am Andre Hagverdian and joined by, as always, by Paul Garrison. What's going on, Paul?
What's going on, Andre? Bye week, man. Big bye week. Get to turn my attention a little bit to basketball, which is starting up. It's busy, man. Busy. Good things. I don't know. Are we allowed to talk this week? So are we allowed to talk after the Dodgers beat the Padres? Or how does that work out?
Or the other way around, right?
Not in my lifetime, no. But we'll keep our fingers crossed.
As a Dodgers fan, as a lifelong Dodgers fan, I have PTSD from postseason series, obviously. And I've seen the Dodgers lose to worse teams in the playoffs than the Padres are currently. So I would not it's a scary matchup for sure. The Padres are hot. They've got great starting pitching. Maybe not game one with Clevenger, but now that I say that, he's probably going to pitch 6 shutout innings. But it's a scary matchup.
Let's see it from your mouth to reality, bro.
I will say, if the Padres beat the Dodgers, I may have to take a few days away from Twitter just to, to not drive myself insane, because it's already bad enough.
Sure.
With some of Padres Twitter that that intersects with Aztecs Twitter. Obviously, there's a lot of Aztec and Padres fans.
Yeah.
It's bad enough when the Dodgers are beating the Padres in the regular season, but if the Padres actually do win the series, might need a few days away from Twitter.
I think
having a bye week is perfect.
It is. Are you getting to see any of these games?
I've got tickets to Game 3 and Game 4 at Petco.
Oh, see, role reversal. Guess who has tickets to Game 1?
You do?
Yeah, bro.
You're going to LA?
I'm going to LA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. My sons were begging me, and when I finally pulled the trigger to do it, they were sold out in San Diego. And my kids are 11 and 9. They're at that age where I got to show them a good time, man. So that way, when they're a little bit older, they still want to hang out with pops.
I mean, there's some resale tickets for Game 3.
I already pulled the trigger, bro. We're going to Chavez Ravine, man. We're gonna go on our Padres brown. Made sure I didn't sit in the outfield. That kind of freaked me out with little kids. So we're in the infield up at the very top, but we're gonna see some family on our way up there. So it should be a good little time.
Nice. Well, enjoy the game. Hopefully, you guys are sad on the drive back to San Diego. Sorry to say that.
Even for Jack and Emmett. Wow.
Well, remember, they told me that you were a better writer than I was, flat out to my face. So, they could have one night of.
Okay, but you got to remember, they also would say that I could beat you up. I mean, they're crazy. They're like, they're at that age where their dad can do no wrong, and I'm just like, gosh, when is that gonna wear away? But yeah, it's pretty funny.
All right, let's change the topic before this gets more out of hand than we want. Obviously, as you said, it's a bye week. Before we kind of get into this most recent game and look at it kind of from a first half of the season recap, two things that kind of happened since we recently recorded a podcast that we wanted to mention. One was the sad passing of former Aztec tight end, Aztec for Life, Gavin Escobar, I believe about a week and a half ago. The night before the Boise State game, from a rock climbing accident. Tragic news. I believe he was 32, had just started the next chapter in his life as a firefighter, had a wife and children. Really sad to hear. It kind of puts football and everything else we talk about in perspective. The team did a nice, moment of silence. I believe his family was on the field with Coach Hoke before the most recent game against Hawaii. So just a sad time, and we send our condolences to the family and close friends for sure for Gavin.
Well said. And, I think that these athletes, they're obviously the best at everything, the best at humanity. You think that they're going to be able to just kind of be like that forever, and have those memories of him playing and things like that. And, it's just how life is, man. None of us are guaranteed anything. And, it's just a reminder to hug those that are close to you and to be able to, have a little bit of, at least for me, just a little bit of perspective, right? About that. It is a game that we cover. It is a game that we talk about. And yeah, we're passionate. Yes, we're all of those things, but at the end of the day, it's not life. Life is so much more valuable than anything that can happen on a playing field or on a court.
Yeah, Hunter Hewitt, former tight end from San Diego State, teammate of Gavin, tweeted out a GoFundMe, calling it was a Gavin Escobar Legacy Fund. He asked us to share it, which we did. I believe as of like yesterday, it was at $68,000. So kudos to Aztec Nation. Kudos, I'm sure, Cowboy Nation, because he played for the Dallas Cowboys, and just NFL family, contributed to that. The other thing I wanted to say before we moved on was, speaking of Hunter Hewitt, I kind of stumbled upon, I think somebody posted it on Twitter, a YouTube link to goaztecs.com, where Hunter actually interviewed Gavin Escobar when they were, I believe, seniors. And they was talking about Gavin's kind of hobby of painting and how he had gotten into painting as a youngster. I think it was like a 5-minute interview. It's on YouTube on the goaztecs.com channel. Anyone that hasn't watched it yet, I think it's really cool video, obviously, view of, who he was as a person outside of the football field. So definitely I would recommend everybody look at that. The other kind of major news was the coaching shakeup on the offense. Obviously, Jeff Hecklinski was relieved of duties after the Boise State game. Jeff Horton got upgraded to offensive coordinator, and Ryan Lindley came back. Ryan Lindley, who we had talked to back in May on the podcast, who's a grad analyst at Mississippi State. So it was a definitely re-energized the at least the team for one game and the fan base, because Ryan is such a good person, and so many people have fond memories of him. But just kind of going back with Jeff Hecklinski, obviously we kind of saw this coming based on how the team had done. Even Heck had told us he understood this is a performance-based business. And, at least through the first, 5 games, the offense had not performed. So, but obviously, I think John Schaefer tweeted it best when he talked about thanking Hecklinski for how gracious he was with the media, asking about how we were doing, how about our families and things like that every time he spoke to us. So definitely want to add on to that and say that we I think both of us agree with what John Schaefer had tweeted, and we wish him the best.
Yeah, without question. And obviously he was very generous with his time for this podcast and with us, and giving us insight into, everything about the offense, allowing us to understand his system a little bit better and things of that nature. But he was always very personable, to help me through a personal tragedy that on the side that nobody needs to know about. But just have a ton of respect for him. And he's not going to be the first good coach who, for whatever reason, things didn't work out in a particular place. And so, I think it's weird kind of to talk about Gavin Escobar and then a coach is firing back to back. But in some ways it is fitting, because at the end of the day, we are still talking about people, and, people matter more than anything else. And at the same time, it is a performance based thing. And, the offense was struggling, and it didn't come as a surprise that's what took place.
Yeah, so the Aztecs beat Hawaii 16-14 on Saturday night. They are now 3-3, halfway through the season with their bye week, and then 6 games after that. Before we get into kind of the overall half season recap, obviously the big news was Jalen Maiden coming in at quarterback and throwing for over 300 yards. And leading the game-winning drive, capped off by Jack Browning's 26-yard field goal. Well, what do you make of what happened with the whole Maiden thing for Saturday?
I'm not really sure what to make of it. I mean, and just to be perfectly honest with you, it's it's just strange. Like I don't really feel like I've seen backup quarterbacks come in the game and they're way better than the starter, and they ignite something, and they win. But I've never seen a guy switch positions, not practice, not throwing the ball around since January, I guess. And then he goes and has one of the best passing days that we've seen from an Aztec quarterback, in a long time, right? I mean, up there with Lucas Johnson's bowl game, etc. Just bizarre. I mean, that's the best way. It's legendary. It's wild. So I'm not really sure what to make of it. It's what a Division I quarterback should be able to do, considering the way that Hawaii played them. But it's something that very few Aztec quarterbacks have been able to do. It's he played confident. He played. It was remarkable. I mean, what did you make of it?
Coach Hoke pretty much was talking up all week that they expected Burmeister to be cleared. Now I'm thinking that was maybe just coach speak, and they actually never intended on Burmeister playing.
Yeah, and I thought it would be Liu.
Yeah, and then I was like, oh, Liu's going to start because he's been quarterback for the last 9 months. Or else for the last, his whole life pretty much.
Yeah.
Right. But in the system, he's been there as a quarterback. So I don't obviously we weren't at practice. We don't really know how practice went, but Jalen got to start. He played really well. He did a lot of great things. Had a couple plays that probably would want back, which is understandable. I think the key was he wasn't looking to run at the first chance of pressure. And he was more inclined to stay in the pocket and go through his progressions. Go, first guy's not open, second, look for the second guy, look for the third guy. Something we haven't really seen from the quarterbacks through the first 5 games. And I think that was part of it, because we both talked, wide receivers have been open all year. They ran the same routes for the most part on Saturday night. The offense, they had subtle changes, obviously a lot more taking snaps under center instead of all shotgun, some more play action. But at the end of the day, the receivers were running the same routes that they've been running and getting open with. It's just that this time the quarterback was more, at least, I don't know, more confident or more trusting of the offensive line to kind of hold their blocks a little bit longer than, even though it might look like they're going to give up the guy. And it's just being able to stay in the pocket and look for guys downfield, I think, was a major difference.
No, I completely agree. And one of the things that I did subsequent to the game is I went back and looked at some of our work from the spring game that was close to COVID, where, we were basically the only people there, looking through some of the stuff and then and remembering and just doing all of that. I think one of the differences between that Jalen Maiden and the Jalen Maiden that we saw on Saturday was his decisiveness. He was much more willing to say, like, this is my receiver, one of these 2 receivers, and go and be aggressive with it. And I think that, for whatever reason, I think people are going to want to say, well, okay, if he was able to do this in one game, like, he should have been the guy last year, he should have been the guy, all that stuff. And, I think growth and things like that it doesn't happen in that same linear fashion, And so who's to say that switching to that side of the ball, switching to defense and working with Kurt Maddox, who told us that, the thing that he needs to learn how to do is he needs to learn how to hit. He needs to learn how to play with that competitiveness and that fire that you don't see from a quarterback. And so he definitely was different in that way. But the thing where he was the absolute same was his pocket presence. We talked to Jordan Brookshire, one of the first people on the podcast, and he told us, he's like, the guy can work his feet, and he was better in the pocket than Brookshire and Johnson last year. Yeah. And that really stood out, his willingness to just kind of be there. And that really stood out on Saturday. I mean, the thing I thought was most impressive to me was how, like, at the very start of the game, and kudos to Jeff Horton for these calls, that they were not, you didn't have to think very much about these passes. It was short routes, curls, get it to the receivers, get it out quick. Not even sometimes he wouldn't even drop. It was just go, which was really smart. But as the game wore on, he started to make quarterback plays. So he started to start on his read was on the outside, and then he would make his way back, and he would find other guys. His path to Tyrell Shavers, where he rolls to his left and allows Shavers to be able to come all the way across the field for a 40 some yard gain. It was fantastic, and those are kind of those playmaker plays that you would like to see from an athlete like him. But I agree, he extended plays with his legs with the intention of passing, as opposed to I'm gonna try to beat everybody with how I run. That said, it will be really interesting to see, because I think I would agree with you that I mean, the idea that any idea that Maiden is not the starter going forward would have to be coach speak, or he completely falls off the wagon in practice. But what does it look like for Nevada when they have time to game plan for him, right? How do they treat it? Are they gonna? He wasn't terribly accurate at times through behind receivers, kind of. So are they going to drop 8 and they're going to say, okay, you're going to have to fit it into windows when you haven't been this precise in a long time? But then if they do that, now can they run the ball? I mean, there's all kinds of different things that now come about. But Jalen Maiden was exciting. And gosh, wasn't he impressive in the post-game press conference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he did the on-field interview with CBS Sports. Then he spoke to us, and then he went on the John Schaefer Aztec wrap-up show. And like every time he was asked about him, he deflected to teammates, coaches for preparing him, for embracing him, and like, yeah, we haven't heard too much. That might be the first time we ever heard Jalen Maiden speak. I can't remember the last time he was in a press conference or anything. Do you?
I happened to have a conversation with him. It had to have been their pro day. It had to be their pro day. So I had a conversation with him on the side during that pro day, and he was explaining, same kind of thing though. He was explaining, why he wanted to go to safety and some of those things, and just talking about how he really wanted to go after it. And I think that he was all in. He repeated that to us at the press conference. He was all in at playing safety. And, it seems like, in that he was rewarded in this game for being team first. It's terrific, right? I mean, what a great story, and what a change to the season it could mean.
You made a good point about, there's tape on him now that other teams can look at, because Hawaii cannot have prepared for Jalen Maiden to be
no way
on the field, because I think he played like 2 games in Mississippi State like 3 years ago. And he played against Utah State. In the Utah State. But like, they could not have expected him to be the starter.
New offensive coordinator and what that would look like and all that stuff. Absolutely.
But now you've got teams who will have film on him, will be better prepared for him. But then conversely, he'll have more time to watch film, correct the stuff that he didn't do so well. So I cannot see any situation where Maiden is not the starter at Nevada. How the season goes from there, we'll see. But I cannot imagine that the team would rally behind Burmeister at this point, given what Maiden just did. The biggest thing I wanted to also point out, I mean, third down conversions were huge in this game. 7 of 16. The Aztecs, not only were they the worst passing offense in terms of yardage, they were the worst third down conversion team at 18%. And they were 7 of 16 in this game. And that included several third and longs. I think there were 2 third and nines, consecutive third and nines on the same drive, I think, which they got their second field goal early in the fourth quarter. That those were one, he ran for 10 yards and trucked the guy on the sideline, and then he threw a pass to Shavers that I think it was Shavers for a first down. That just was not happening. So when you're able to convert those third and longs, like, your confidence has to soar from there.
Agreed. And I think, talking about him trucking somebody, that's what I'm talking about with just that aggressiveness. I'm not sure that he's trucking people before that. And that's also what I mean by like he as the game wore on, his quarterbacking, like him being a savvy quarterback, really, really improved. I did appreciate you giving me a little shout out, reminding Aztec Nation that I said not to sleep on Jalen Maiden when it came to the QB competition. Don't look too closely, or I'll start looking more like a broken clock that's right twice a year or twice a day. It's just interesting. It's just an interesting development, and definitely something that look forward to covering as we move forward.
It's funny if you go back and listen to the podcast we did right before spring camp,
mm-hmm.
Where you also, when we were giving our predictions of who would be the starting quarterback, and you went with Jalen Maiden. This is obviously right before we found out he moved to safety, but I said Will Haskell.
Right.
So a lot has changed. Since then,
I will say that after writing that article and then making that prediction, and then hearing through the grapevine that he had switched positions, I didn't think that a few months later that article and that podcast would actually look pretty good. I thought, well, I missed there.
Yeah. What about the defense? Obviously, they only gave up 14 points, which is overall that's a good number, but they're still not. We're still not seeing the same Aztecs defense that we're accustomed to over the past decade.
No, I completely agree with both of those things, and I think that's I don't know the right word, but that's kind of the bet that they've made when you have been really good and now you've been just inconsistent. You've been really good at sometimes and really bad at others. It's always just going to pale in comparison, But yeah, I mean, they gave up 14 points. I mean, and one of them was on a long pass.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an inopportune time to have the one scoring drive that they were going to sustain. It was a bad time to have that happen. Jalen Maiden's heroics are completely meaningless. And we're talking about, a 2-4 team, and like, well, maybe they can build off something with Maiden and things like that. We're not talking about a win if the defense wasn't what it was. And so to there's not really a way to frame this to say that the defense played poorly. There's still elements, as you say, that they're just not as dominant as they've been. I think it should be pretty troubling that Hawaii, like Boise State, had success running right up the middle, because every team can do that. That's not something that you have to. Every team has that in their offense. Every team runs that. Every team cares about that. If anything, Hawaii didn't do it anywhere near as much as Boise State, and maybe to their detriment. They wanted to pass the ball and couldn't really, for the most part, with the exception, of course, of that one long pass. And so I think being able to shore that up if they're able to shore that big weakness up, I think that they have the potential to be really good in the second half, because they're not playing teams that are just dominant. I mean, that's just not who's on their schedule, dominant offensively, and so I think they can make some of these improvements, figure out whether it's scheme, how this defense needs to work together, and then as they go forward, getting healthy, they can be better than what they've been. As pointed out in the article that came out this week, when they've been good, the Aztecs won, and when they haven't been, their offense has not been able to pick them up and to provide that scoring margin. So I thought, 14 points. What do you you can't be upset with 14 points.
If you look at the defense overall, like I look at the secondary, and 3 of the 5 starters in the secondary have been replaced already. Replaced by week 4, right? So Darius Barfield got replaced after 1 week by Devon Celestine. And then both corners have been replaced. I think Noah Avenger got replaced in the Utah game, in the Utah game. And then Dallas Branch got replaced by Noah Tumblin in the Toledo game. So 60% of your starters in the secondary have already switched out. I don't know if Coach Maddox would have expected that. Now they are rotating Barfield in, they are rotating Avenger and Branch in, but the other guys are getting, the starts and the majority of the snaps. And then you look at McMorris and Baskerville, while they're still starting and they're still playing, like they're not playing up to how they played at the end of last year. And so if you factor all of that in, interesting stat. So missed tackles have been a huge thing for the defense this year, right? Starting with the Arizona game where they missed like 30-something tackles. It hasn't been that high since then, but they still had glaring. If I asked you who leads the team in missed tackles, what would your answer be?
Missed tackles.
Pro Football Focus. I know.
Sure.
The team number.
Okay, so okay. Now it's not McMorris only because you just gave that whole little thing. So if you were doing that as a lead in to say that that's McMorris, that would make the most sense. But it's, to me, it would have to be either McMorris, Michael Shawcroft, or Kade McDonald, because they're in the middle of the field where all of these crossing routes and all these things have been. And so they would have the most opportunities to be able to make plays and things like that. Obviously, Shawcroft did not miss very many tackles in that first game, so he probably got a good head start. That's just it's anyway. So where are we at?
So Shawcroft only has 5, so he's not it. He's in the middle of the pack. But tied for first are McMorris and Kade McDonald with 10.
Yeah, because they're in the middle. They're in the middle of the defense.
And CJ Baskerville is second or third, but tied for second with 9.
Yeah. That's
those
because
those are your top 3 out of 4.
100%. And I agree. And that goes to the point of I asked Kade McDonald after the game, I said, how these runs up the middle, what needs to happen? And he said, it's not the scheme. We got to get off blocks. We got to this and this and this. And so a stat like that would kind of suggest to that, because if you're Kurt Maddox and you're going to say, where are we going to put the stress of our defense? You want it to be on Baskerville, McMorris, McDonald, Shawcroft. Like that's the heart and soul of where you want the tackles to be made. But it also speaks to all 4 of those players' range, the fact that they do play sideline to sideline, and all of the arbitrary ideas of like what constitutes a missed tackle and all of those kinds of stuff. But that to me is like, I got him right. That's they're in the middle of the field, so that would make the most sense that they would be the players who would have the most opportunities and who would also have the most opportunities to miss.
Yeah, so these are Pro Football Focus's missed tackles. I know the teams missed tackles sometimes will vary slightly.
They were real close in Arizona.
Yeah, so maybe some of these guys are 1 or 2 different based on what the team has seen, but I think for the most part, these numbers are fairly accurate. But
yeah, absolutely. But I still think that taking them on face value, I think is they need an explanation and they need a story. So who is Shawcroft tied with?
He's by himself.
Oh, okay.
5.
Who's around with 4?
Darius Barfield has 6, and then Laka and Avenger have 7.
Okay, so like I would go and say like that's a good stat to compare Laka and Shawcroft, because they're both in the middle of the field and they're both getting the same similar kind of stuff, and Shawcroft has way more opportunities and has less misses. Right. Yeah. And so then when you're going and you're looking and you're saying, okay, well, why didn't Laka start this last week? And you say, well, that, right? Or you go and you say, well, what is it that Sedarius Barfield doesn't do that Celestine does do? And you could point to something like that from the same position now over a few weeks and things like that. Celestine's tackling ability stands out from that position. And so I think like those kind of comparisons and those kind of explanation make it understandable, as opposed to just saying, oh, okay, well, because again, I would say that like if you were to say that because Kade McDonald has 10 and Laka has 7, therefore Laka should be playing for McDonald, and it's like no, that does not mean that in the slightest. I think it just depends how you use it in the narrative that you form around it.
Yeah, I mean Cooper McDonald, Jonah Tavai, and Shawcroft have like the lowest missed tackle percentage rate out of the main players. Des Malone is up there, is pretty good too.
Good tackler.
These you look at these stats just to kind of help tell the story, but you have to add on to what you're actually seeing on the field and the circumstances and stuff. But like we can all agree that the defense has not played as well as we thought they would.
Mhm.
And while the offense is partly mostly the blame for three losses, the defense has played some part in that.
Yeah, and now kind of moving into the second half of the season a little bit, but on the same topic, I'm one of the things that I did find interesting and was I think a significant difference between Jeff Horton as the offensive coordinator and Jeff Eklinski is they huddled, right? And
Yeah.
they just used more time. And so they had their first 3 5-minute drives of the year. And part of that goes back to being better on third down, like you were talking about. But it also goes back to the fact that, that's just not, they played at a quicker pace. They had more possessions, and having more possessions was more important under Hecklinski than it is under Horton, right? And so as a result, there is a higher point ceiling under Hecklinski, but a lower floor, right? And conversely, there's a lower ceiling but a higher floor because you have just less possessions, and so the games are artificially more closer.
Yeah.
And so I think that if you were looking at trends in the defense, I think the one part that is surprising is that they have been as good as expectations were, and then suddenly were not, right? Or they were able to turn it back on, or they were able to. So teams score in bunches against them. In other words, they score possession after possession. It'll be interesting to see if cutting off a few of those possessions allows their defense to, figure it out a little bit more on the sidelines, having more time to be able to study it and think about it and analyze it, or just that the teams aren't going to have the opportunity to find the weakness in the defense because they just have less chances to do it. And so I think that's a really interesting change that Aztec fans are going to be able to see, because another story of the Hawaii game is that it was only close because they kicked 3 field goals in the red zone. One of them they missed. And if they make one more field goal, right, or they score one more touchdown, it's not a close game, relatively speaking. And so I think that's going to be we're kind of back to what they were a few years ago under Horton, where time of possession, limiting the number of drives, and then which elevates the importance of each drive just a little bit more.
My prediction before the season was that the Aztecs would be 4-2 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, in theory, they're only one game off from that. The Arizona game was the one that I had as a win, but I obviously thought the Toledo and Hawaii games would be, bigger margins and they'd play better. And I definitely didn't expect offensive coaching changes after week 5. But
right,
as we pointed out, they're still control their own destiny to win the conference championship. The Boise loss doesn't take that away from them. But they've got some really tough games. It's funny, games that looked the toughest on their conference schedule at the beginning of season don't look as tough, maybe. And some of the games that maybe we thought was going to be fairly easy look a lot tougher, right? Like Fresno State, with Jake Haener out, they've been struggling. And we don't know if Haener's going to come back. So that game doesn't look as difficult. But then San Jose State I think they're 4-1. They got a vote in the AP poll this week.
They're looking good.
UNLV can put up points. Air Force, about their running game. So it's not a cakewalk of a schedule, 6 games remaining.
Nope.
Can they win all 6? Sure. Can they lose, 4? Sure.
Well, see, and that's the question that needs to be asked is, I'm a little bit more of the let's get them bowl eligible first before talking about them being, championship conference contenders. Because, in with all of the superlatives of Jalen Mayden's game, with, having a new offensive coordinator, with the defense only giving up 14 points. They beat arguably the worst team in the conference by 2 points at home. Again, I could be wrong. And here's the other thing. It could be wrong. And usually when I say that I'm going to be wrong compared to what a casino or a betting line, I usually mean like they're right and I'm wrong. But what on earth were they thinking giving the Aztecs 3 touchdowns plus against Hawaii? I mean, that's just the craziest line I'd ever seen in my life. But anyway, so me doing my own prognostication of being favorites, I can only see 2 games right now where I could say, okay, they're going to be favored. And that's Nevada, and at New Mexico. And then, finding one win with Fresno State, which I don't know where Haener is going to be. If it's severe, I can't imagine why you would rush back and not try to get ready for your NFL career. But, who knows? And then between Fresno State, Air Force, San Jose State, UNLV, finding one more win there. Sitting here today, I'm not confident I know where that's at. And they've been playing UNLV tough the last few years anyway. They play San Jose State tough the last few years. They have a really good defense. Air Force, you always kind of like getting them at the end of the year compared to the beginning of the year. They kind of wear down as the season goes on. So I just like to see a little bit more from them before starting to think that they're, they're the top team in the Western Division, because I don't think that they're close to that right now.
I think what's also going to be critical is in how some of the main injuries bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
We obviously talked about Burmeister, his concussion, but I think the 2 main injuries are Michael Shawcroft and Ross Ulugalo Masuli. Shawcroft was out. He was in a boot during practice. He's got obviously 2 weeks for the Nevada game. We'll see if he's able to come back. Ulugalo Masuli has already missed 3 games with a right knee injury. Hopefully he can come back after the bye, but we'll ask Coach Hoke tomorrow at the press conference, or on Tuesday on the press conference. We'll see what he says. He's always pretty coy with especially with so far out with the bye week. But Dean Abdullah got injured in the second quarter, I believe, and was out the rest of the game. Tommy Mirabella took over. So having Ulugalo back and Shawcroft back, I think is going to be critical. One thing I wanted to mention, though, talking, some of the positives for this season.
Yeah.
Kade Bennett has been really good.
Mm-hmm.
He has, among guards in FBS, he's ranked second with a 91.3 pass blocking grade per PFF. That is pretty impressive. He has played really well. His penalties have kind of ticked up over the last few games. I don't think he had any the first 2 or 3 games, and he's had a few in the last game, but he's done a really good job. He's made some really big blocks on some of the long runs early in the season. So what was kind of a concern coming into the season of who's going to replace, who's going to be that left guard. I think he's solidified that pretty well. The other guys have played pretty well for the most part. Josh Simmons, penalties have been a big thing for him. He had 2 more against Hawaii. But, I'm eager to see how the offensive line gels as the second half of the season comes on. If they have more stability at quarterback, we'll see where that goes.
But that's being a victim of your own success again. I mean, when you're 12-2, 3-3 looks really bad. I know that there was a couple of little fans that I brought home, and they were just mad. They've lost more games this year than they lost all of last year, and I'm like, oh, you poor young little San Diego sports fan. You if you think that's heartache, but I think there's a lot of positives. I mean, Jack Browning has been sensational. He's been so good. I think that Jordan Bird and his play. I mean, man, kudos to Gio or the EVT video guy. That juke that he has on a punt of 84 where he puts, he makes him fall. And then he had that Chance Bell. I thought Chance Bell came back and he looked like the explosive player that we had seen in practice. You had said that he was your key to the game, and he didn't quite get the number of carries to be that, but I think he was a couple away from being that player. So I think that's really, really positive.
He ran hard, fast,
Hard,
like
yes,
shot out of a cannon fast. It jumped out at me on his first carry. Like, oh wow, he almost looks faster than Jordan Bird on some of these carries.
completely,
He looked
completely.
like he was like taking out all the frustrations from the first half of the season. After coming in with these high expectations, being the lead guy, showing what he can do, and then injuries and offensive issues kind of derailed that. But he looked like he was letting all that anger and frustration out on that game. It was good to
Yeah.
see.
Yep. You don't like to see coaches get fired on any level on anything. But Ryan Lindley coming back to the Mesa is a win for the program. I mean, there are a few people who are better proponents and have understand what the program is better than him. And they talk that they're going to be going out recruiting. You kind of can't close your eyes and imagine any person who could recruit San Diego State better than their all-time leading passer, who was the person who was at the helm at the beginning of this turnaround that's lasted these last 13 years, and so I think that's a real positive. On the defensive side, I really think Desmond Malone is coming into his own. He is knock on wood, injuries and all that stuff, but he's looking like he's on a pro NFL trajectory. His size is something else, but he's starting to play with better confidence. Jonah Tavai, I think, has just been all over the place, athletic. And you go back a few years, where Rocky Long was subtly calling out the JC guys that they brought in for help, and they just weren't ready to help, and not knowing where Tavai would be, and then him coming in and just being this fan favorite, wearing 99, and it was so weird looking at him on the field, and like it's like an illusion because when he's it's kind of when he's out down in his stance, 99 looks like 66.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, am I seeing that right? And then I finally decided, no, that's actually 99. And I'm texting Dawn, get pictures, make sure you take pictures of him as wearing 99, And so I think that's been very, very positive. Michael Shawcroft is not a positive just because of his injury, but before his injury, he was clearly playing his best football. You still have the camaraderie that's very evident between Cooper and Caden McDonald. But I think there are a lot of positives on this team. Breon Penny contributing and being realizing some of that potential that everyone sees. Tyrell Shavers talking about sending out these cryptic tweets about you can't ask somebody who has no time to be patient, and him talking with us in that same vein of thinking like, I gotta have this has to work for me to reach my dreams. And then for him to go for eight catches and 159 yards or whatever it was, obviously continuing to be 149. Thank you. Continuing to be like a really good red zone threat. Getting to Jesse Matthews, hopefully will start getting into that again. So there is, Makai Shaw, a walk on, who was just tough as nails last game. I mean, those catches that he was making in traffic or along the sidelines have just, so there's a ton of positive things if you're willing to look at them. And then of course, going into the bye week, the whole tenor of kind of everything changes because Jalen Maiden can throw the football. Like, where on earth did that come from? So I think there's a ton of positives, and seeing how the rest of the season goes on, because the one thing about the Aztecs, we talk about them wanting to become bowl eligible before they get into that conference championship race, but that they're going to be competitive and they're going to fight, and that's what Brady Hoke teams do, and so it should be a great end of the year.
One guy to add to the mix, Max Garrison.
Hey, yes, I agree.
I'll be honest with you, I did not pick this up during the game until I read your grades article that he was on kick returns.
Yeah.
Next to Jordan Bird. I honestly I just hadn't really been checking because everybody was kicking the Birds side.
Well, and they also and the other thing too is they didn't have the first kickoff of the game was at the start of the second half.
Oh
And
yeah, that's
and
true.
so and I don't know this is if this is true or not, but I think I
No,
saw at least
they scored a touchdown in the second. Oh, that was in the third quarter. Yeah,
third
you're right.
quarter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so weirdest thing. I think that I crossed Max Garrison's mother, Lisa, at the
Mhm.
game. And it was one of those where you kind of cross somebody and you're like, I'm not really sure. And then you go, oh, that is. And I turned around and I called her name, but the person kept walking. So I may not have. And literally as I was returning back, that was when he's standing there and he's returning kicks for the first time. So, and then the other probably advantage that I have for that is anytime the PA announcer goes, Max Garrison, I think he's talking to me.
Yeah.
See,
There you go.
so I, yeah, I wouldn't say, but I think that the journalist Arciega that you interviewed when you were doing your article on him and what they
Yeah,
told us,
Escar Sega.
Escarcega, thank you. I went for it though. I went for it. Escarcega, what he told us about him being like a fast
Yeah.
next level, like he just stands out to you. I think we've seen that even just in special teams. Like his explosion when the Boise State punter dropped that ball and he was like on him in a second. But you've seen it in other areas where he's been able to just like close gaps and have a quickness about him that belies his age. And so yeah, but that was pretty exciting. And I do think that that's he's on the field every special teams. He's given everything he's got for the team. And I think that his power, Chris Johnson, I think he's another positive, played a lot of cornerback. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what it'll be going forward just with the red shirts and things like that, but he also plays special teams. We need to check what participations, because he might already be passing, so he'll be going on special teams and continuing to do that. I think there's a lot of positives. The offensive line, as you mentioned, they're missing pieces and they're still growing pains, but they still open some big holes. What are you saying?
Chris Johnson, he's played 4 games out of 6.
Yeah, so that's he's right at that point.
Yeah.
He's right at that point. They'll be making probably those decisions. They'll be making those decisions coming forward. But he's again. I mean, Eric Butler at the beginning of the year, and he was playing a little bit more. So there's a lot of positives. There's a ton of positives around this team, and it's sometimes can get lost maybe in the negatives, which we've spent plenty of times the last few weeks, on those. But I mean, Snapdragon Stadium. I mean, cool thing for me. My dad was able to go to the game this week. He had season tickets this year. The other stadium opened, so the guy's been to so many games. Took me as a kid and stuff, and so there was, a cool picture of my boys and him and me that Don was able to take for us from the field. And just to be able to experience all that, he thought that Snapdragon was great. That it's that they did a really, really good job with it. There were 33,000 people at the game, and I think that was maybe a little bit. I don't know but the concourses were full. You're watching recruits that are walking around, and it's like there's a vibe and an energy that was not at the old stadium. I think they absolutely got exactly what they were looking for in Snapdragon. Obviously it was difficult to have some of that because of the heat of the other games, and it kind of got lost on it. But that first night game under the lights, I thought was just a great atmosphere. And obviously the Padres they were playing. And so, that's going to keep some people at home and things like that. But it was a great crowd. The stadium was more full than it had been, at least in the seats wise, than in the other games. But again, the concourses were all still there. Everybody was partying and having a good time. The tailgating has been a thing again that San Diego has missed for all of these years with the Chargers leaving. And that's, I mean, the list goes on and on for positives that have come from this Aztec football season. And, expect a lot more positives going forward.
Aztecs won't be at Snapdragon Stadium for about 4 weeks because
Wild, huh?
they've got the bye, and then they've got 2 road games before I think November 5th UNLV comes here. But Snapdragon Stadium will have a postseason game Sunday night with the San Diego Wave. I
There
will
you
be
go.
there. I will be
Yeah.
there, and hopefully San Diego will come out because it should be a great atmosphere, great game, and hopefully the Wave can move on to the semifinals of the playoffs with a win.
And how does every soccer league seems to have their own playoff rules and things like that. So what's at stake on Sunday?
So this is the quarterfinals. So if they win, they move on and play the.
Is it just one game, or did they go home and home?
Yeah, it's just one game. It's not
Okay.
like European soccer rules.
Got it. So where will the semifinals be, or does it depend on the other side?
No, the first and second seeds have byes, and they'll host the winners of this weekend.
Got it.
So the Wave were the third seed, so they're hosting the sixth team, or were they the fourth? They're the third seed. They're hosting the sixth seed, and if they win, they'll go on the road to the second seed next Saturday or next Sunday.
Oh man, could you imagine if and then is the finals at the stadium of the highest seed? Where's the finals at?
I think it's in Washington D.C.
Oh, very cool.
A
Very
field
cool.
there, I believe. I'm not sure, but it's a neutral site game.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's awesome. So that's Sunday.
Sunday night, yeah.
What time?
7 p.m.
Oh man, gonna think about taking some kiddos out there, but that's a late one.
Yeah, but the games are 90 minutes, so you're pretty much out of there by 9 o'clock.
Oh, see, that's a good point.
Actually, I take that. Well, now that it's playoffs, there might be like a 30-minute extra time and penalty kick, so it could actually go a little bit past 9. But it's still not a 3.5-hour football game.
Yeah, no doubt. Opener that was sold out and broke their attendance record, and I think the second game would have broken the attendance record if the first one didn't exist. No, what was the other one?
They didn't sell tickets to the upper deck.
It was still 18,000.
Yeah, but that was.
I thought it was below.
The record was like 26 or 27,000 before.
Oh, I saw a different number. Okay. You're more connected to than I am. Okay. I thought I had seen a lower number. 18,000 though is still a ridiculously good amount for a soccer game.
Yeah, I was at that. I was not at the first game because I was in Utah for the Utah game, but I was at the second one, and it was a great atmosphere. Now I was watching the Boise State game on my phone through most of that, and that's kind of soured. That kind of soured my night, but I still enjoyed myself.
There you go.
All right, that's gonna do it for us. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. Hopefully, our recap of the first half of the season. We have a bye week coming up this weekend, but we do have a special podcast episode coming this weekend with an interview with a San Diego State legend that I think you guys will definitely enjoy. So keep a lookout for that one. Should be coming this weekend. So. Good night to all of you, and we'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.